organized by Pushpa Gujarat Science City at the occasion of birth anniversary of Charles Darwin, best known for his contributions to evolutionary biology. We are extremely honored to have Dr. N.G. Prasad, Professor Biological Sciences and Dean Outreach and International Relations, ISER Mohali, Dr. Nilima Jairath, Director General Pushpa Gujarat Science City, and Dr. Rajesh Grover, Director Science City. I would request Dr. Nilima Jairath to kindly address the participants. Over to you, ma'am, please.
Thank you, Loveleen. A very good afternoon, Dr. Prasad, all my colleagues, all the teachers, all the students who have joined us now for this at this platform. Well, as you all know, we are celebrating Darwin's Day, primarily to commemorate the birth anniversary of Charles Darwin. All of you would have heard the name of Charles Darwin, but I would like to begin with a story. And the story is that there was this very young boy in UK who was very curious, did not accept what others said simply. He would always question everything, and he was a great thinker. Because he was very brilliant, his parents wanted him to become a medical doctor. And they got admission for him at the University of Edinburgh. He went as per his parents' wishes, unwillingly, of course, but once he was there in the medical school, he was very, very unhappy. He just did not like the dissection of frogs. He just did not like cadavers. He just did not like blood all around him. And he ultimately decided against the wishes of his parents to come back home to leave medicine. At that time, the year was 1831 and around. And at that time, there was a famous ship which was to leave to go around the world. And that was of great interest to this boy. And that ship was called HMS Beagle. So his parents did not want him to go because it was a 2-year trip. But he convinced them somehow, and ultimately he went. And he was very, very careful. He went with his own pocket money. He did not take any help from anybody, for the simple reason that he was very sure that when he goes to all those places where the ship would take him, he would be collecting a lot of materials. And he did not want to share that material with anybody till he had studied it himself. And that is how Darwin became what he is known for. An ecologist par excellence, who was always in the field. This ship came back after, it was a trip of 2 years, but the ship came back after 5 years. It took him to South America, all around South America. He crossed the Atlantic, he crossed the Pacific, he went through Indian Ocean, went to areas like Maldives, etc. And ultimately, when he returned back to England, he had a lot of information, a lot of samples with him. And this is how Charles Darwin became the man he was. When he came back home, he started sorting out his material. He was so curious to find out interlinkages that when he was studying his material, when he realized that there were some missing links, he even went back to South America to recollect those links. And with that, he came up with the theory of evolution. He came up with he decided to dispel the common belief at that time that different species originated as a supernatural phenomena. He proved that the species evolved through very minute changes over hundreds and thousands of years, and they are still evolving. He proved that there were genetic factors, and at the same time, there were environmental factors. And with this, he came up with his theory of evolution, the theory of origin of species, the theory of survival of the fittest. We all have been introduced to Darwin somewhere in class 5 or something. And we are just told that he came up with the theory of the survival of the fittest. But then this is the background, the amount of work which he had to do before he could come up with that theory. And let me tell all of you that his book, Origin of Species, was first published in 1859. By 1879, he had come up with the 7th edition of the book. And this book is still available. You can still buy it. You can even download it free from Google. There is this site, books.google.co.in. So you can download the book, the PDF from there. It is available on Kindle. You can buy it on Amazon, and it's also available in audio form. So if any of you are interested to know more about evolution, more about Darwin, please download the book or buy the book and try and read it. It is indeed a very interesting book. There are sections which you might find a bit difficult, but if once you start reading it, you start appreciating the link between species. And it is indeed great fun reading it. Because of the good work which he did, he got the privilege of burial at the Westminster Abbey. I have had the privilege of looking at his grave at the Abbey, which indeed I think is a privilege for any ecologist to be able to see. So Darwin, basically his works had great impact on the science of anthropology. He helped solve a number of problems related to human evolution, variation, heredity, etc. And Darwin has now become a symbol of curiosity, a symbol of scientific thinking, a symbol of hunger for truth. Today, we have with us a very learned evolutionary biologist, Dr. Prasad from Aizer Mohali. And it's a proud privilege to welcome him today to this PGSC platform. Dr. Prasad, we are extremely grateful to you for agreeing to speak to our students and our teachers who are on this platform today. And I welcome you on my own behalf and on behalf of my organization, and also on behalf of all the participants who have joined this platform today. A very warm welcome to you, and I would not, because the topic of your talk is extremely interesting. So I would not like to come between you and your talk and the audience. So in fact, I'm looking forward to listening to your talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your inspirational address. And we are indeed very honored to have Dr. Prasad with us today. Dr. Prasad is a PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research, Bangalore. His research areas are evolutionary genetics. His lab is specifically interested in intersexual conflict, evolutionary ecology of immune response, and life history evolution. Dr. Prasad is a recipient of several awards and honors. He was elected as Fellow of the Indian Academy of Sciences, Bangalore in January 2021. He's a Fellow of Indian National Science Academy, INSA. He's founder secretary, Indian Society of Evolutionary Biologists. He received Best Teacher Award in 2012 at Aizen Mohali. He has won the Best Thesis Medal in Biological Sciences, JNCESR, in 2005. Dr. Prasad will be speaking on a very interesting topic today, that is the story of Spotted Camel. Over to you, Dr. Prasad, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Lovely. You have been very, very helpful right from the first. I would also like to thank all the organizers, especially Madam Nilima. She has been very kind in extending the invitation. I would like to begin by wishing you all a very happy Darwin Day. It is indeed a very remarkable occasion. It is important to note these occasions because these are important in the history of science itself, not just biology. Let me share the screen. I hope you people can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so this is the title of the talk, The Story of the Spotted Camel. And over the next 30 to 40 minutes, I hope to tell you a series of stories. What is the goal of telling you these stories? I have 2 or 3 major goals. One is whenever I talk to people about evolution, the common idea is evolution is something that happened millions of years ago. It's very difficult to study it. As a science, it is very different because you can't have predictions and test those predictions. I want to show you how, even in evolution, over the last 150 years, people have made testable predictions and have tested it. It's a science like any other science. The other common misunderstanding about evolution is something that leads to perfect organisms, very good organisms, flawless organisms. I want to show you that evolution just is. It doesn't have a goal. It doesn't necessarily make organisms perfect. It just makes organisms that are better suited to its own environment, and in the process uses whatever it has at hand, right? So ultimately, evolution might lead to organisms that are poorly designed in a global sense, but work very well in the environment that they are in, right? So these are the broad goals with which I have formulated my talk. So it's a story of the spotted camel. So where does one go to see camels? Where else? But where you would likely to find them, the large deserts, right? So this, is Africa. And in the north of Africa is one of the largest deserts in the world, the Sahara. Very close to it is a country called Niger. And within Niger, there's a small place. It's called Dabas. If you go to Dabas, you would like to see camels. You do. But in Dabas, you actually find something else. What you find here is the Sahara, and there's a rocky outcrop on the Sahara. What you find here is the world's largest rock-cut animal portraits. These are life-size portraits of 2 giraffes. These were probably made, we think, about 8,000 years ago by the Paleolithic people who lived in this area. Now, it's very interesting that giraffes are being rock cut by people who live in the desert. What does it tell us about the history of the desert? Or why did they do it? That's an interesting story, maybe for some other day. But what I want to address is, if I'm going to talk about spotted camels, why am I showing you photographs of the rock-cut giraffes? Well, there is a reason. It turns out that the binomial nomenclature of a giraffe is Giraffa camelopardalis. You know the binomial name of humans, it is Homo sapiens. And if you look at a simple English translation of what Homo sapiens is, it is intelligent man. Similarly, if one asks what is the simple English translation of Giraffa camelopardalis is, it turns out it means giraffe, the spotted camel. It's a very interesting name for an animal. Why call giraffe the spotted camel? And where did it come from? If you look at the present day giraffes, they are mostly exclusively restricted to Africa. We talk about giraffes, but it turns out that there are many, many different types of giraffes. Experts disagree whether there is one species and 8 to 9 subspecies, or there are four species and 7 subspecies. Whatever the disagreement, what is clear is that there are different kinds of giraffes, and all of them in the present day are present in various parts of Africa. Okay. Therefore, people in Africa, right throughout history, have been very familiar with giraffes. Okay. Here are some very ancient art. This is from the tombs of various pharaohs. Even in the time of pharaohs, giraffes were depicted in their tombs, right? Which shows that they were very familiar with the idea of a giraffe or the animal giraffe. We are talking about pharaohs up north Africa. Giraffes are spread throughout, right? So people were generally aware of the giraffe. Here is a very famous, very well-known pharaoh that we are very familiar with, Tutankhamun. It is said that even in his tomb, when they opened it, they did find the tails of giraffes which had been offered to him as gifts. They were still stored there. So thousands of years ago, also people knew about giraffes and valued them. But this is in Africa. Just outside Africa, how aware were people about the giraffes? Well, it turns out that the closest neighbors to Egypt, the Greek and the Roman Empire, people from the ancient Greek and Roman empire did not know too much about the giraffes. This animal was called camelopardalis. This is a writing by Pliny, who is a very famous Roman historian and writer. He calls it camelopardalis. Why camelopardalis? Well, if you look at the animal, he says, it looks like it's a cross between a camel and a leopard. It has a really long neck like a camel, and it has spots on its body like a leopard. In fact, leopard is called leopard because its Leo is lion, pardos is spots. A leopard is a spotted lion, right? So camelopard is a spotted camel. If you look at another great Roman who's traveled around a lot and wrote a lot of travel history, Pausanias, this is about 1st century AD, he is more specific. He says that he saw an animal which was like an Indian camel with the color of a leopard. So all these people, the ancient Greeks and the Romans, had heard of this animal which looked like a camel but had spots like a leopard. So therefore the name camelopardalis, or the spotted camel. These are all about having heard about the giraffe. Did anybody actually see the giraffe? Well, it turns out that the first recorded sighting of a giraffe outside of Africa is about 46 BC. This is the time of Julius Caesar, height of his power. It is said that Julius Caesar went to Africa, won parts of Africa, and when he came back, he brought with him some gifts, one of which was the camelopard. Dio, in Roman history, writes that I will give an account of the so-called camelopard because it was then introduced into Rome by Caesar. So Caesar was the first person to bring back a camelopard or a giraffe to Rome, so therefore outside of Africa. And he says that its skin is spotted like a leopard, And for this reason, it bears the joint name of both the animals. So it looks like a camel, long neck, but bears the spots like a leopard, and therefore it bears the joint name of both animals, and therefore they called it a camelopard. Well, Julius Caesar brought the giraffe back. Why? Along with many, many other gifts. Why did he have to bring a giraffe back? Throughout history, we will see again and again, giraffe has been used as a political tool, a political pawn, a statement of power. Think about it, a really large animal, very magnificent animal. If a king, a ruler, a dictator, or a general owned it, controlled it, it spoke something about his power, right? And it was also an animal that was not commonly available. It was available only in Africa. So if you could bring it over, that spoke about your power. So throughout history, giraffes have been used as a measure of the power of a ruler. And therefore, Julius Caesar, it is said, brought it back as a showing off of his power. But even though he brought it, his giraffe did not have a very good life in Rome. Julius Caesar is very famous for having animal fights in the Colosseum. It is said that he fed his giraffe to a bunch of lions in front of the people of Rome in the Colosseum. So that giraffe had a sad ending. And it is said for the next about 1,400 years, nobody outside of Africa ever set eyes on a giraffe. But legend survived. The Romans' love for giraffe survived. This is a mosaic, the flooring of a house that has been recently discovered. It's called the Lord mosaic. It's important because it shows a large number of animals that were known to the ancient Romans, and they are made in mosaic. Very beautiful. This is really, really large. And if you look at it very carefully, right at the center, there are many animals, including tigers, which are essentially found in India, lions, which are not really found in Rome, right? Elephants, which are found only in Africa and India. And you also find a giraffe, right? So the fascination for giraffes continued, even though a live giraffe was not really found, was not really seen outside of Africa for a long time. It's said that the next live giraffe that people saw outside of Africa was somewhere in 1414 AD. Very strangely, a giraffe was presented as a gift to the Ming emperor of the Ming dynasty in China. It also has an interesting India connection because this animal was captured in Kenya, brought to Bengal, and the Sultan of Bengal, as a gift, sent it to China, the Emperor of China. China at that time was sending out naval fleets. It was doing a lot of exploration. And these naval fleets also served as transport. And in one of those, this giraffe was sent. So again, a giraffe being used as a gift, as a measure of power, right? That story continues. In 1486, after about 1500 years after Caesar brought the first giraffe into Europe, the next giraffe, live giraffe, was seen. And this was a gift from the ruler of Egypt to the ruler of Florence, Lorenzo di Medici. This is very famously called the Medici giraffe. The Medici giraffe came into Florence and immediately was a sensation. It became the topic of the country, and it was painted. It is part of some very famous paintings like the Gathering of Manna or the Adoration of the Magi. Here, if you see very carefully in the corner, you can see the Medici giraffe being brought, right? Why was this a gift? Again, political reason. It was given to Lorenzo as a political pawn. Lorenzo planned to give it to the ruler of France so that he could get some favors from them. Point being, giraffe was always adored as an animal of power, right? Sadly, though, like Caesar's giraffe, the Medici giraffe also did not have a very happy ending. The Medici giraffe was sent to Florence. Now, Florence is a very cold place. So Lorenzo had made all arrangements to put it in a stable which was heated so that it could stay in a very comfortable place. But story goes that shortly after they put it in that stable, there were rafters that were supporting the roof of the stable. But they did not make the roof too tall. So the giraffe got its neck stuck in the rafters, broke its neck, and died. So this giraffe also had a very sad ending, did not live for long. Again, for the next 300 years, nobody saw a giraffe, but interest in giraffe did not come down. The official formal naming of the giraffe happened in the 1700s. Of course, Carolus Linnaeus, who named many things, also named the giraffe. In 1758, he formally gave the giraffe the name of Cervus camelopardalis. There's a genus Cervus, camelopardalis being the specific name. It is very interesting. The term camelopardalis we first hear in the 46 BC, right? Meaning being a spotted camel. The same word is used by Linnaeus to give the species its specific name, like the spotted camel. So 1500 years, 1600 years, or actually here in this case, it's almost 1800 years, the name still persists. That, of course, is corrected just a few years later by another scientist, Brisson, who calls it Giraffe camelopardalis. So where does the term giraffe come from? Well, the Europeans got to know about the giraffes through the Arabs, through trade with Arabs. And in Arabic, I'm told, Zarafa means camel. Means giraffe. Therefore, the modern name giraffe comes from the Arabic name Zarafa. Okay, so it got named, but still nobody had seen the giraffe. The next giraffe to be seen were 3 giraffes actually, sent by Mehmet Ali Pasha, the ruler of Egypt, as a gift to the rulers of France, UK, and Austria. The last 2 that went to UK and Austria again did not survive for too long. They lived for less than 2 years. But the one sent to Charles X of France lived for a very long time, and it had a very important role in the history of giraffe on the psyche of people in Europe and on the scientific history of giraffe. Right? This giraffe was captured in Kenya in 1825 and had a 2-year-long journey to reach France. It is said that it was put on a boat. The top deck had to be cut out, made a hole so that the giraffe could put its head out to accommodate the tall head of the giraffe. And then it was transported. And then from the port, it was walked to Paris. And throughout the place, people were thronging the streets trying to look at this very strange animal, which had not been seen in a long, long, long time. Right? It reached Paris. It was put in the garden of plants in Paris, and it lived for 18 years. Very recently, strangely, it was given a name. It has been called Zarafa. This is an actual painting from that time in 1800s of the giraffe that stayed in Paris. And this is the actual giraffe. After it died, it was stuffed, and it is still in display in Paris. Okay. So this particular animal was seen by thousands and thousands of people, and it caused a frenzy, a positive frenzy for all things giraffe. It has been said that in Europe, lots of things happened. For example, people made small figurines of giraffe. It is said that certain fashion trends, like the tall hats that men wore, was in relation to the tall neck of the giraffe, right? It is said that women in Paris started wearing their hair like the horns of a giraffe. So there was a lot of passion for all things giraffe. In fact, it even has its own name. It's called the Giraffe mania of that period. Is this giraffe elicited a lot of public interest. It was not only in fashion, it also elicited interest in the scientific circles. One is, how did the giraffe get its long neck? The other is, how did the giraffe get its spots? In today's talk, I think I'll be able to address only the first question. The second question is left to all the students to figure out for themselves. Lots of people have done lots of very interesting studies, but you should go back and read up and find out about them. But when I tell you these studies, I don't want them to be the just so stories. If you have heard, there is this great writer called Rudyard Kipling. Even if you don't know his name, I'm sure you know one of the things that he wrote, Jungle Book. Right? He was born in India. He got a Nobel for his writing. And he wrote lots of very interesting stories. One of the storybooks that he wrote was something called the Just So stories. In these stories, all that he's doing is, he is taking various animals, looking at their features, and writing stories, imaginary stories about how they got that feature. For example, how did the leopard get its spots? How did the rhino get its thick skin? How did the elephant get its long trunk? These are just so stories. There is no evidence. These are stories. But the questions that we have.
Okay. Sorry, there is some problem with the audio. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So the question that we want to answer are scientific questions. We don't want to answer questions in a just so story way. So is there evidence? If there is a hypothesis, can we test it? That is the way we want to go. So if the question is, how did the giraffe get its long neck? What is the answer? Well, it turns out that the answer is the giraffe's neck evolved. So therefore the answer is evolution. How did the giraffe get its spot? The obvious answer is because of evolution. So what is evolution? Well, evolution is the change in the heritable characters of a population over generations. So suppose this is an ancestor and each dot represents its descendants, then some character that can be passed on from parent to offspring is changing within this population. If that is happening, then the population is evolving. This particular photograph is from a very beautiful experiment which people did with respect to antibiotic resistance in E. coli. So they took E. coli, which did not have any antibiotic resistance, and they evolved them. So their future generations over time, they become more and more antibiotic resistance. The point being that if you have a character that can be passed on from parent to offspring, and that character changes in the population over generations, then this population is evolving. This is evolution. So how did the neck of the giraffe evolve? That is the question. The first answer to that comes from this person called Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. Lamarck gave a general idea of how evolution happens. Essentially, it can be encapsulated in 4 points that he said. First thing that he said that, look, there is a certain life force, and this life force tends to increase the size of the organs. Second is that when you put an individual in a new environment, there is a new need. And this life force will push the organism to develop an organ based on the new need. Third, if you have an organ and if you use it a lot, then that organ will increase in size. If you don't use it, it will decrease in size. Finally, if you have developed an organ because there is an environmental need, then that organ that you developed in your lifetime will be passed on to the next generation. Based on that, he explained his evolution. So you can look at basic idea of Lamarck in this schematic. So there is an internal urge within the organisms which grows the organs. Suppose you put them in a new environment, there is an environmental change, then there is a new requirement that arises. Now that because of that new need, an organ might be used more, a new organ might be developed. If that organ is used more in that environment, then that organ develops better. That organ is then passed on to the next generation. Same way, if in an environment an organ is not used, then it decreases in size, and this next generation will not inherit that organ, or will inherit the organ in a reduced form. So if you keep on doing this again and again and again, you have new organs, new forms of individuals. So based on this, what did Lamarck say about the giraffe itself? He actually wrote in his book, Philosophie Zoologique, in 1809. Remember the year becomes important, 1809. He wrote that it is interesting to observe the result of habit in the peculiar shape and size of the giraffe. This animal, the tallest of the mammals, is known to live in interior of Africa, in places where the soil is nearly always arid and barren, so that it is obliged to browse on the leaves of trees and to make constant efforts to reach them. So it lives in very barren areas, so it has to always try to reach trees at higher and higher places so that it gets food. Below in the ground, it is arid, there is no food. From this habit of long maintained in all its races, it has resulted that the animal's forelegs have become longer than its hind legs, and that its neck is lengthened. If I put this in a schematic, what he's essentially saying is that, look, ancestors had short neck, but they lived in areas where there was little food on the ground, there was more food on the top of the trees. So these ancestors had a need to develop longer necks. As they reached out to the taller trees, their necks became taller. But this acquired character of longer neck is then passed on to the next generation. So the next generation has a taller neck, but then that also stretches. So when this keeps on happening again and again and again over generation, because of the need to reach for food higher and higher, the neck becomes longer and longer, right? So this is idea of Lamarck. But again, remember, we don't want just so stories. How do we test Lamarck's idea? One important component of Lamarck's idea is that, look, if somebody stretched their neck became longer, then I see I'm running out of time, so I'll be a little quicker. Then that long neck is inherited by their progeny, right? Is that so? Well, another scientist called Weismann did an experiment where he took mice, chopped off their tails, let them breed. Next generation, if characters are acquired and inherited, then the children should not have tail. He found that the children had tail. He chopped off their tails, let them breed, looked at the next generation, kept on doing it for 22 generations, and he found every single progeny had a tail. So therefore, he said that, look, it is unlikely that characters that develop during the life of an organism, be it strong muscles or long necks, that stay and die with the organism, these are not passed on to the next generation. So you cannot inherit acquired characters. Okay. If that is the case, then how do organisms evolve? 1809, the same year that Lamarck published his Philosophie Zoologique, a young boy was born. His name was Charles Darwin. 50 years later, he published a book on the origin of species by means of natural selection. So the importance of Darwin was that he gave the idea of natural selection. So what is natural selection? It is an idea that he and Alfred Russel Wallace came up together. The idea is very simple. It says that there is variation within population. So if you think of a group of giraffes, there is a variation in their neck length. That observed variation is heritable. Long neck giraffe give rise to long neck progeny, short neck giraffe give rise to short neck progeny on an average. Some individuals are more successful in survival and reproduction than others. Some giraffes do well, they survive better, so therefore they have more progeny. Some giraffes don't survive so well, so they don't have as many progeny. Variation influences fitness. That is, those who have the most favorable phenotypes are naturally selected. That is to say that if a giraffe has a character that is good in a given environment, it will survive better and reproduce better compared to some other giraffe, right? So what essentially Darwin is saying is that, look, the original population of giraffes had short-necked giraffes and long-necked giraffes. As food became scarce in the lower end, only the tall-necked giraffe could survive better because they could get food. The short-necked giraffe died. When the long-necked giraffe reproduced, on an average, they had progeny that had longer necks. When you repeat this over and over and over, what happens is over time, you have a population where the long neck is very, very common. So therefore, the population has evolved, right? You can put all this into Darwin's postulates. He's saying that giraffe have variable neck length. The neck length is inherited from parents to progeny. During shortage of food, some giraffes survive better than others and therefore leave back more progeny. But remember that it is heritable. And if giraffes with long neck are better able to obtain food, they survive better, they reproduce better, then over time you will have more and more long neck progeny. Therefore, you will have more and more long necked individuals in the population. That is the idea. So what Darwin is suggesting is that the neck of the giraffe has evolved because there is a necessity to reach food at the higher regions. How do we test this? We don't want, again, just so stories. How do we test the idea that long necks have evolved to help in feeding? Well, if you think about it, we can make some predictions. First thing is, for this idea to work, is that the giraffe should face competition when they are feeding at the lower level in a tree. Is this true? How do you find? Think about it. What Darwin is saying is, giraffes started feeding at the top level because food was limiting at the lower level. Other animals could eat the food that was available at the lower level. Other animals could not reach the food that was available at the top level. Therefore, giraffes are feeding at the top level. Is it true that there is less food at the lower levels? What scientists did was they went to Africa where giraffes and other animals live. They built some nets around some trees 2 feet tall, and then they protected some trees. Some trees they did not protect. Now, when you protect some trees, what happens is the lower level is protected from all animals. Whereas in other trees, the lower level is not protected from all animals. Then they went back and saw how much of leaf was available for feeding in these two kinds of trees. Okay. And this graph shows you that. What you have on the x-axis is the height of the tree, and on the y-axis, how much food is available. White bar shows you trees that were protected. Black bar shows you trees that were not protected. If a tree was protected, then at all heights, you have a lot of food. If a tree was not protected, lower levels had less food, higher levels had more food. Why did lower levels have less food? Because the tree was not protected, other animals came and ate that food, so the food has become less. So therefore, it is true that at lower levels, there is less food available for the giraffes. So maybe that is why they are eating at the top. If you look at this, what it is showing is the neck position when the giraffe has to feed on plants at this level or this level or this level. So the giraffes have to really extend their neck and eat at the top level because that is where most of the food is available. Okay. Second prediction that one can make is if the giraffes evolve their long neck to feed on top of the trees, they should be feeding on top of the trees. Do they actually do that? One can go back and ask that question. So this shows you the different positions of the neck of the giraffe. Okay. So at about 1 to 2 meters, they are bending their neck. At about 2.5 meters, they are almost parallel at shoulder height. Then they extend the neck a bit. For 4 meters and above, they're really stretchy. Now I can ask, where are they actually feeding? If you look at it, this last two is what you should observe, male giraffe and female giraffe. If you look at the male giraffe, 50% of the times it is feeding at heights that are 3.5 meters or low. It is feeding in this region. So most of the time it is not really stretching its heads. 50% of the time it stretches its heads. If you look at the female giraffes, 50% of the times they are feeding 2.5 meters or low. Most of the times they are feeding at shoulder level. Even when it stretches only about this much. It is not really stretching too much. So unlike what we would expect that the giraffe should be feeding at the top level most of the time, it looks like they're not feeding at the top level most of the time. What could be wrong? Well, maybe we measured it at the wrong time. Maybe giraffes really feed on the top of the trees when food is scarce, right? Is that the case? When food is scarce, do giraffes feed on the top of the trees most of the time? People looked at it in some regions in Kenya. What they found was very interesting. When in dry season, when the food is very scarce, giraffes seem to eat at the lower level. When in rainy season, food is a lot, they seem to eat at the top. So they are doing exactly the opposite. Why are they feeding on the top in the rainy season? It turns out in the rainy season, all the trees bloom. Nice juicy leaves are present mostly on the top. So they are feeding mostly on the top. So giraffes are doing exactly the opposite of what we would expect, right? So suppose we assume that the giraffes evolved long neck because they had to be tall to feed on the top of the trees. Then their legs and neck should increase proportionately. Right? Think of you and somebody who is lesser than you in height in your family. You're tall, but it's not that just your legs are tall. All parts of your body are proportionately higher, right? Suppose only your legs were very tall, the rest of your bodies were comparable. Then I would say there is something special wrong about your legs. So if it is for feeding, then all parts of the body of the giraffe should increase proportionately. Is that the case? Well, how do you test that? Well, here is an animal called okapi. It is the relative of giraffe. It is not tall at all. It's like a cow. It has a certain leg length and a neck length, and the neck is not very long. As opposed to that, you have the giraffe, very long leg and very long neck. Very long leg, very long neck. So what people did is they asked, what is the ratio of the leg length to neck length? If you look at the okapi, the neck is only about 50%, 40% of the length of the leg. This is true of the baby giraffe also. It's only about 50%. If you look at the adult giraffe, the neck is almost as long as the leg. So neck has become disproportionately longer. There is something special about the neck. Why is the neck becoming disproportionately longer? This does not support the idea that this is only for food. So where are we? Well, if you look at all these experiments and predictions, it looks like there are some things that support it, some things that don't support it. Do we have an alternative idea? Well, scientists have come up with an alternative idea. And this alternative idea is that the long necks help males in winning fights. This relates to an idea called sexual selection, which was also proposed by Darwin. See, Darwin looked at some animals like, for example, the long tail of peacocks. He said, natural selection cannot explain it. Long tail should make survival difficult. They will be easily caught by predators. So why do males have long tails? He said that maybe because they have an advantage in reproduction. The females like males with long tails, so therefore they have more children. Therefore, long tails are advantageous, not in survival, but in reproduction. We see this again and again, for example, in many bird species. This is also shown in a slightly different forms when males compete with each other. Let's say males have to compete for reproduction. Then let's say the horns help to win fights. Larger the horn, better is the chance of winning. Then what happens is the length of the horn becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So this is also because of sexual selection. So what the suggestion is being made here is that the neck of the giraffe, male giraffe, is like the horn of some antelopes, right? How do we test this idea? So far we said neck is because of feeding. Now we are saying long neck is because of reproduction. It helps in fighting and winning fights. If this is the case, first thing is that it's the males that fight. So only males should be using the neck to fight. Is this true? People have done a lot of observations. Male giraffes do use their necks to fight. So they have their head, they have the neck, they swing their head and hit each other. And this is called necking. And necking is seen only in male giraffes. And necking is the only way in which the male giraffes fight with each other. They don't fight in any other. Okay. If the males are using the necks for fighting, then the male giraffe should have longer necks, stronger necks compared to the female giraffes. Is this true? Well, it is true. If you look at the necks of male and female giraffes, females have shorter necks and less muscular necks. People have measured the neck size in males and females in various ages. What they find is males continuously increase in the neck size and neck length, whereas the females don't have as much. They grow to a certain age, and after that, their neck size does not increase. So what we have found is that the males have about 30 to 40 centimeter longer necks and about 2 times heavier necks. Male giraffe should show stronger and larger skull because they use their skull to hit each other, right? Is that the case? Well, it turns out that that is actually the case. The males have larger skulls, thicker skulls, heavier skulls compared to the females, right? Just like the neck size, the skull size, the head size is also very different between the males and the females. It's larger in the males, okay? So males use the neck to fight. They have larger necks, they have larger heads. But does that mean that males with longer necks, stronger necks are more successful reproductively than males with smaller necks? What scientists did was they took giraffes, classified them according to their necks. Group A had large, strong necks. Group B had smaller, slender necks. Group C had even smaller necks. And then they asked what happens to their reproduction. What they found that the males with the largest necks were dominant to B and C groups. Not just that, the males with the longest necks were more eager to court the females. And females seem to prefer to go with males with longer necks than with shorter necks. They did not even go with males that had the shortest necks. So very clearly, having long necks had an advantage to males in terms of being dominant and in terms of being more attractive to females, and therefore probably have more progeny. But this is a problem for this hypothesis. If we accept that there is evidence for this hypothesis, think about it. We are saying ancestors had short necks. The males began to fight, and therefore their necks became longer. But who fights? Only the males. So the male neck should increase. Nah? Why did the female neck also increase? This is a problem for this hypothesis. Well, one possibility is that, look, during development, you don't have separate set of genes for developing male necks and separate set of genes for developing female necks. So as the male necks increased in size, as a byproduct, maybe female necks also increased in size. It's an explanation, maybe not very satisfactory. Okay. So where do we stand? We have two hypotheses. One is that the long necks evolved because of food, other because of mates. If you look at all these evidences, there is some that support the idea that long necks evolved because of food, some that support long necks evolved because of mates. Which one is correct? Well, it turns out that it is not necessary that we have to choose one over the other. It is possible that necks are advantageous for different reasons at different points in time. Sometimes it might be for feeding, sometimes it might be for fighting. It's quite common in evolution that a given character can help you in more than one thing. It is also possible that the necks evolved for one reason, maybe for feeding, but now are being used for some other reason, which is for fighting. Okay, this is very common. A common example is the feathers of birds. It is thought that the feathers of birds evolved to keep body temperature at a certain level, but those feathers are now being used for flight. So this change in the function is very common. It happens repeatedly. So maybe the neck has been used for something till now and is being used for something else now onwards. Okay, let me just check the time. Loveleen madam, how much time do I have?
Please take your time. Maybe another 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. But these are not just the hypotheses. It turns out that what I told you, neck for food versus neck for fighting, are just two of the many, many hypotheses. There are many other hypotheses that have been proposed. One says that long legs evolved to escape from predators. And as the legs became long, as a byproduct, neck also became long. Right? There's another one which says that large bodies evolved to maintain body temperature. And as the body became larger, neck also became larger. Why do you have to maintain body temperature? Remember that these live in Africa, in very dry, hot regions. This is an actual photograph. Well, actually, this is a model of the body of a giraffe and how heat is being radiated. It looks like the patches somehow help, the neck somehow helps, and the large body somehow helps in radiating temperature. People have also proposed that maybe the long neck helps the giraffe to look out for predators. You're high on top, you're looking all around. If there is any predator nearby, you can, or even far off, you can easily identify it. These are all hypotheses. So which of these hypotheses is correct? It's for you people to figure out. Okay. As you do more and more research using testable hypotheses, we'll learn more and more. But remember, all these hypotheses are well within the Darwinian paradigm, the ideas that Darwin proposed. When a neck increases in size, one can ask, how does it increase in size? And can the neck increase in size alone as an isolated case? We often forget when we are looking at the evolution of a particular character that an organism is a whole. It's not just one part can evolve. The whole organism has to evolve. If you look at our necks, the giraffe's neck, the okapi neck, all of us are mammals, so we all have 7 cervical vertebrae, only 7 bones. Does the giraffe have extra bones? No. All that has happened in giraffe's case is that each of those 7 bones have become really, really long compared to its cousin, the okapi. Okay. During evolution, the same 7 bones that we have in our neck have become really elongated in the giraffe also. So the neck has evolved. What does it mean? Think about yourself, right? If you think about it, you have your heart in your chest, and then you have your head. Right? Your heart has to pump blood into your brain and your head, which is maybe about 7-8 inches away. Now think of a giraffe. As the neck elongates, the heart which is in its chest now has to pump blood 6 to 7 feet high to a brain which is far, far away. Neck is evolving, but there is a problem being created, not just for the neck and the vertebrae, but for the heart. Now it has to do more work. What one would expect? Well, the heart has to change because the neck is changing. How does the heart change? This is a comparison of a human heart with a giraffe heart. Giraffe heart can weigh 11 kilograms. It's a massive heart. It's a huge heart. It's a muscular heart because each time it pumps, it has to push blood about 7 feet above to reach the brain. So, okay, a massive heart has evolved. It's very strong. When it pumps with a lot of force, the blood into the brain. But think of a slightly different situation. How does the giraffe drink water? This is how it drinks water. It bends its head and drinks water. Now think about it. When the giraffe is upright, the heart is very strong, is pumping blood into the brain. When the giraffe bends, the same heart is again pumping blood with the same pressure, now downwards, right? So this extra force can actually damage the brain. Not just that, this is the jugular vein. The jugular vein is supposed to bring the blood from the brain back into the heart. Now, when it bends, instead of taking blood from the brain back into the heart, it will also bring blood back into the head. So when the giraffe bends, it will have so much blood rushing into its head that it can die because the blood vessels burst. It's a problem. Neck has become long. there are other additional problems. How do you solve it? Well, giraffe has small sphincters in its blood vessels. It's like speed bumps, which reduces the speed of blood. It has developed a sponge-like network of blood vessels around its brain so that the blood doesn't just rush into the brain. It first diffuses into these blood vessels, and then it reaches the brain. If you look at the jugular vein of the giraffe, it has developed a large number of valves. These valves will allow only unidirectional flow of blood. It will allow blood go from here to here. It will never allow blood from the heart to move back. Think about it again. We were so far considering only the elongation of the neck of the giraffe. The neck never evolves in isolation. Lots of other things have to evolve. But the most interesting thing that has evolved, I will say this and I'll stop probably, is this thing called the recurrent laryngeal nerve. All of us have evolved from fish-like ancestors. They have this nerve called the vagus nerve, which goes and joins the gills, right? It supplies the gills. In us, the gills have gotten modified into various organs which are situated in the throat region, okay? So this particular branch of the vagus nerve has now gotten itself caught behind the aorta. So now this has to go around the aorta, come back up and supply to the regions of the throat, which are the modified gills. So if you look at humans, the vagus nerve comes down like this, goes around the aorta, goes back up to the regions which are modified gills and supplies them. It could have taken an easy route from here, branch off, come here. It cannot, because evolution is inefficient. It goes all the way down, loops around this, comes back up. Okay. Now think what happens in giraffe. Here is the brain. Here is the vagus nerve. The recurrent laryngeal has to come back all the way down the neck, into the chest, around the aorta, go back all the way into the pharynx. It could have just taken this shortcut. It cannot, because it's stuck because of evolution. So this nerve is about 15 feet in giraffes. Very inefficient, but it is. If you think that is the longest nerve, it is not. See, all of the organisms shown here share the same common ancestor, which are fish-like ancestors. There are some dinosaurs which had necks that were about 40 feet long, 50 feet long. In these, it is supposed that this recurrent laryngeal nerve was about 100 feet long because it has gotten caught behind the aorta. Okay, very inefficient, but that is how evolution works. There are many other interesting features. For example, the plants don't take it easy. If the plants are all eaten by the giraffe, then it's a loss for the plant. So the plants have started developing thorns. Now there is no food for the giraffe. What does the giraffe do? It develops this really long prehensile tongue, which it uses to go around the thorns and pull out all the leaves. So eating by giraffe prompted thorns, and the thorns prompted the giraffe to evolve long tongues, right? This is coevolution. But if the long tongue evolves, then there is a problem for the plants. So what have the plants done? They have developed these things called galls, in which they house ants. And if the giraffe tries to eat the leaves, then the ants come out and bite the tongue. Okay. So now behavior of giraffe with the plant has led to the evolution of thorns, which has led to the evolution of the tongue, which has led to the evolution of a cooperation between ants and plants to protect the plants, right? So the simple idea of natural selection, evolution by natural selection, can lead to very, very complex evolution, both in structure, like we saw in the case of the nerves of the giraffe, or in the levels of organization. Look at this, a plant, an insect, and a mammal are all locked in together in this whole collaboration because of evolution. Okay. So let me stop by saying this. Ideas of evolution have testable hypotheses. Now, if you think of giraffe, it's a fine example of how natural selection can lead to very complex interaction involving many, many different organisms. It is also an example of how evolution does not always lead to perfect organisms. It just works with whatever it has. Okay. Let me end by showing you something. So far, we have talked about giraffes all around the world. What about giraffes in India? We have some evidence that in India, we knew of the giraffes. Concrete evidence comes in the forms of sculpture. This is a sculpture from the Konark Sun Temple, about 12th, 13th century, right? That is where we see for the first time a clearly marked out giraffe. So we knew by then, definitely. This is from Mudbidri in Karnataka, which is about 14th century. Again, clearly marking out a giraffe. So we have been seeing giraffes in India roughly around the same time. Okay. Anyway, I'll stop here. Thank you. I would like to thank all the organizers for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing valuable knowledge with us. Now we'll be taking a few questions. Whoever wants to ask questions, please raise your hands. We'll unmute you. Or you can inbox us the questions in the chat. Yeah. There's a question from Jaideep Singh. Jaideep Singh, please unmute yourself. Anyone else? I think Jaideep has logged out due to some reason. Please raise your hands in case you have any question. You can drop your question in the chat.
I personally think it was such a wonderful talk that everybody is spellbound.
Yeah.
And they really don't know what to ask. I wish, Dr. Prasad, you were my teacher when I was a student.
Oh,
I sincerely wish that.
There's a question in the chat box. Sir, do you think with time, humans will have big heads due to increased brain size as compared to the other body parts?
How humans will evolve has been a very interesting topic. Will we have large heads because increased brain size? It's interesting if you think about it, that brain size doesn't necessarily correlate with cognitive functions. Of course, larger brain helps, but it does not always mean that having a large brain will make you more intelligent. It's something to do with brain per body unit. Plus, also always remember that maintaining a brain is very costly. You know, there are estimates that your brain eats up anywhere between 20 and 40% of your energy that you take in. That's where it goes, right? So it's very costly to maintain a brain also. It's possible. It's possible that we will continue to increase in our brain size. If you look at human evolutionary history, certain parts of our brain have increased in size much more than certain other parts. So it is also possible that you won't get an increase in the overall brain size, but certain parts of the brain, right, which are involved with thinking, learning, remembering, maybe those parts will be much more elaborated than other parts. Okay. So it's possible, but it's difficult to say whether it will be overall increase in size or certain parts to be increased in size, or even more something intricate, like maybe you will have much more connections within the brain, within a given size. Maybe that will evolve. That's also possible.
So, Harkirat, I hope we have received your answer. Okay, she says thank you. Any other question? There's a question from Vishal. Can evolution helps to recreate environment to produce species that has gone extinct?
Okay. One has to answer this question very carefully. Okay. Once a species has gone extinct, it has gone extinct. Unless you use something like biotech, where you try to bring it back using some DNA techniques and all that, you're not bringing back the same species. But you could answer this question in a slightly different way, interpret this question in a slightly different way. And this is the way I want to interpret it. There have been seas on this world forever. Even before fishes came in, even before dolphins came in, lots of organisms have been living in the sea. There have been reptiles which have been living in the sea. Right? First fishes, they came first. Right? And fishes have a certain form. We all know what a fish looks like. From the fish-like ancestors, you had vertebrates which went onto the land, let's say reptiles. Some reptiles came back to the sea. Remember, reptiles had 4 legs and hands, like sort of like you and me. Right? But when they came back to the sea, their legs and hands turned out like the fins of fishes. Their body form, which was like the lizards, changed to become more fish-like. You have the ichthyosaurs, which look like fishes. They went back to the sea, started looking like fishes. On the land, the ancestral reptiles gave rise to mammals. Some of those mammals went back into the sea, the ancestors of dolphins and whales. When they were going back into the sea, they had hands and legs, sort of like you and me. They were walking on all fours, right? Like other animals that we see around us now. But once they went back into the sea, they evolved a body form which was like fishes. Their limbs became like the fins of a fish, right? So given a certain environment, history has shown us a certain body form can repeatedly evolve. In that sense, that yes, evolution can help recreate organisms of a certain form, which fit a certain environment. Assuming that the form and the environment is constant, therefore the most fit form remains the same across time, then we can see the evolution of fish-like organisms every time some other ancestral organism has gone back to a life in sea. So it's possible. But if you interpret it as bringing back the actual extinct species, then my answer is no, it's not possible.
There's another question. Is Jurassic Park possible?
Okay. We don't have so much of Jurassic DNA. So it's unlikely that we will have Jurassic Park as of today. But there are other efforts that are on. For example, the famous case of trying to bring back the woolly mammoths. See, the woolly mammoths, it's much more easy. They went extinct very recently, just a few thousand years ago. And some of them are also trapped in ice, which gives us access to a lot of DNA. Both the fact that they went extinct only recently and they have been trapped in ice gives us access to DNA. So there have been claims that we know enough about these mammoths now that we can actually bring back those mammoths. So maybe not Jurassic Park, but a certain extinct animal being brought back is possibly within our reach.
So there's a question from Vedika. Could apes ever evolve into some other human-like creature?
All organisms are evolving all the time. Even if you think of humans that I and you are, as we talk, our population evolves. Every time there is a pandemic, it is possible for an organism to evolve, not just humans, any organism to evolve. We are not saying that they will evolve every time. I'm saying it's possible. There are recorded history of human populations evolving. There is a famous case of we being able to digest milk. Earliest humans apparently were not able to digest milk because they did not have a certain gene in very high frequency in the population. But as we started using dairy, there has been selection. People who could utilize it probably had greater fitness. Now, a large number of humans can produce that particular protein, an enzyme, and digest milk. This is evolution, right? So human population has repeatedly evolved. Therefore, humans can continue to evolve, apes can continue to evolve, all this is possible. If the question is, will apes of today evolve into something that is like the humans of today, then I have no idea. Maybe not. They will evolve into something, some other being, they can give rise to new species. It doesn't have to be necessarily a human-like organism. Okay. We all shared a common ancestor several million years ago. And we had several branches even within the human lineage. It's just that we seem to be the only surviving species. You know, we are that way. We are a very sad species. We don't have very close relatives. All of them have gone extinct. Right? We are the only surviving species. So it's possible that other species will continue to evolve into newer forms of organisms. Doesn't have to be humans. This is where I say that we had a large number of cousins. All of them have gone extinct. So these can also evolve into something that looks like humans. It doesn't have to be humans of today.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. No more questions are there now. I would request Dr. There's another one question if you would like to answer. Is evolution from ape to humans from Shivalik hills?
Okay, I will interpret this question again. Is there evidence of human evolution present in Shivalik hills? Answer is yes. One of my colleagues works extensively on Shivalik hills, Dr. Parth Chauhan. If you are interested, you can talk to him. He will tell you the story of human evolution as recorded in the Shivalik hills.
Okay.
This would be wonderful, Loveleen. Please
Yes.
note this. We can invite him to one of our future talks.
Yes, sir. Can you please repeat the name?
Dr. Parth, P-A-R-T-H, Parth Chauhan.
Dr. Parth Chauhan. Sure, sir. Definitely we'll invite him sometime. Okay.
It would be interesting for children to know about something which is closer to where they live.
Yes, ma'am. Exactly. So now I would request Dr. Rajesh Grover to propose vote of thanks. So please.
Thank you, Dr. Loveleen, and good evening, everybody. And well, it's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks at the occasion. And I take this opportunity to extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. N.G. Prasad, the Professor in Biological Sciences and Dean International Relations and Outreach, ISER Mohali, for delivering a very interesting talk at the occasion of the celebration of this Darwin Day. You have beautifully explained the story of the spotted camel and how this long neck of giraffe has resulted in some very peculiar anatomical features which helped us to understand the complex beauty of evolution. And thank you very much, sir, for your very enlightening talk and sparing your valuable time and to be with us this afternoon. And I also take this opportunity to express our gratefulness to our worthy Director General, Dr. Nilima Jairath, for her presence and words of wisdom at the occasion. And I acknowledge the direct and indirect support received from all my colleagues at Science City in organizing this webinar, and take this opportunity to convey my thanks to Dr. Loveleen for the efforts she had made to make it a success. And I am also thankful to all the participants for joining us on this platform and making this session an interesting and interactive one. Once again, thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Prasad. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. This was so nice to see you.
It was great listening to your talk. Really great. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Loveleen. You have been very helpful. Thank you.
So much, sir.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Grover. Thank you, Loveleen.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
And now enjoy your Sunday because Loveleen
Sure.
has been very busy since the last 2 days. We had 4 programs ongoing.
Ah, okay.
All work, work, work. Now all sleep, sleep, sleep.
Okay, goodbye,
Okay,
everybody.
madam. Thank you.
Yeah.